This episode is brought to you by Izzy's Coffee. Coffee, morning, noon, or night. Probably in the morning, though, but I'm not in charge of you. Whatever, do what you want. Keep your partner awake all night with your tossing and turning and sweating, all because you had to have a cup of coffee at night. Whatever, you're the boss. Izzy's Coffee. The following episode of This Band Could Be Your Food was pre-recorded. All curse words were omitted. Sorry.
This band could be your food.
Thank you, intro music. Thank you, listeners. Welcome, you fine-looking people, to This Band Could Be Your Food. My name is Nathan Palin. That song, by the way, the one you hear every single week. I wrote that song with my own two hands. But do they call me Nate the Songwriter? No! Well, yeah, some people do. I am a songwriter. That's a song called Distorted Nights. I'll be releasing it one day as soon as I settle on a good band name. But today is not that day. Today is the day I bring you episode 2 of our Pearl Jam saga. What food is Pearl Jam, if they were a food? Ramones are a cheeseburger. The Go-Go's are a lemon meringue pie. But what food is Pearl Jam? If you're going out of order and listening to this episode first, don't worry about doing the wrong thing here. You're fine. There's no spoilers you have to worry about. But there is an episode 1 that you can also check out, so check that out too. Anyways, Pearl Jam has been decided to be ceviche, so there's your spoiler. But now, listen to us, me and Jeremy, talk about the history and fun facts on Pearl Jam before we go ahead and discuss, and eat ceviche. Jeremy Keen's my co-pilot today, and he knows everything about Pearl Jam. And now you're going to know everything about Pearl Jam too. Plus, we're going to pair wine with it. So here we go. Episode 2 starts now. They were fortunate to be aided by such rock luminaries as Pete Townsend, becomes friends with Eddie pretty early on, and of course Neil Young.
Yeah,
their friendship strikes up because I forget what it was for. Was it the MTV Music Awards? Where it was that very
Rockin'
same.
in the Free World.
They played for the first time.
Yeah.
Which led to them making Mirrorball, the Neil Young album. Mm-hmm. And I think this did happen before...
I think it was after Vitalogy.
It was after Vitalogy? Oh,
yeah.
All right. Because that's kind of where they really come into their Pearl Jammiest.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Pearl Jam...
name?
Where'd the name come from?
There's a great moment later on when Pearl Jam is testifying about Ticketmaster, and they a congressman asked them, I have a question that has nothing to do with monopolies. What does Pearl Jam mean, or does it have a meaning? And Stone says, I'm not going to answer that question. The early legend, which I think was a bit of a troll. I don't know, but it was that it was based on Grandma Pearl's hallucinogenic jam. Like Eddie had a grandmother and made this special jam. And
that is what I heard.
Yeah. And I have yet to see a very concrete answer to this. I saw mentioned in one book noted that there was a restaurant that had a sort of a Pearl name near where, I think it was in San Francisco around the time when they changed their name. So there's sort of a hint that, maybe it was based on this. My theory, speaking of male, female things, is that it's in the grand tradition of names like Steely Dan and Velvet Underground. I think it is a name for the Y chromosome delivery system for men. Yes,
I get it.
Mm-hmm. If you get my drift.
Yes.
Yes.
Steely Dan.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, look up what Steely Dan is. It never occurred to me what Velvet Underground was. until this second.
Maybe I'm, this is very Freudian. Maybe I'm just projecting all of these meanings onto these different band names, but
I love your work.
Thank you.
So we get into Vitalogy. That's, as we said, they're getting super Pearl Jammy. That's when they, and I love that they do this, they released their album Vitalogy on vinyl, I believe a full week before the actual album.
Yeah.
Which spikes vinyl.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, this is like 1995, 96? 95. There's no vinyl.
Yeah.
No one's got vinyls anymore.
Yeah, you still got your parents' record player, and that's
Sure.
exactly what I did. I showed up early at the record store, brought my copy back to my parents' place, and spun the Black Circle.
I was buying new, and that Spin the Black Circle ended up being, they won a Grammy for that song, right?
Yeah, very oddly, I think that's true, yeah.
Yeah, and if you watch the speech, Eddie Vedder gives a very lackadaisical acceptance speech.
I hate to start off with a bang. I'm going to say something typically me on behalf of all of us. I don't know what this means. I don't think it means anything. That's just how I feel.
Jeff later says, like, people complained to me about that, and he's like, I completely agree. I wish I'd had the guts to do it myself. He's like, how do you have an award for art? And I mean, that's not a new position when you're talking about offering awards to art, but I don't know. I think it reflected kind of the larger situation of being famous and more famous than you want to be. And
Sure, they didn't deal with that well.
I think it's hard to you understand why people criticize them for the way that for seeming petulant, I guess, in the face of it.
Cool. What was it like playing with Neil? How did that all come about?
It's an amazing story. We did.
What do you think it would feel like? What do you think?
I think it would feel tremendous. It felt great watching it.
It was like going to church.
Well,
Eddie was doing stuff where, because I think he was such a big rock fan and probably felt to some degree like rock saved his life is maybe a little strong, but it was really, really important to him. And so, he'd show up at Pearl Jam's office and he's reading people's letters and trying to reply to them. And he's internalizing these things where he's taking on this burden that most musicians, most famous people don't want to do. But then that turns into he gets stalkers. Like someone drives a truck into the wall outside his house. Like
What?
Yeah, that might have happened a little later, but yeah, like there's all these pressures. People are pulling you in all these different directions. Like that's hard too. And then speaking of interesting things they do with their fame, they take on Ticketmaster, and suddenly they can't really tour anymore without spending a lot of time and energy thinking about logistics that they never wanted to have to deal with.
It sort of blows my mind thinking about it in retrospect, when we now live in a world when how much money does Ticketmaster take from tickets?
I'll pull their quarterly report. And
obscene amount of money that they take for these tickets. And it's one of those things where at the time everybody was like, come on, it's $3. Who cares?
Yeah, I want to see Pearl Jam. I don't want to have to go to some weird venue in the middle of Maine to go see them. Like,
totally. It really shows you just like one of the reasons why America really just falls flat sometimes. It's like this could have been an opportunity if people would have banded behind it. Like maybe tickets wouldn't be so dang expensive right now.
Yeah, well, and just to fill people in on it, this is where they wanted to put on, I think, a benefit concert, and they worked out like we want the price cap to be $20, and Ticketmaster gets $2, and that's that. And then they find out no, Ticketmaster is going to take more, and then they sort of harden their shells over it and really start to dig in. And then I think they tried to tour for over a year essentially without them, and they learned that it's really hard. And then the Justice Department, I don't think it was necessarily because of Pearl Jam, but they were investigating Ticketmaster over monopoly practices. And so you get Jeff and Stone going to Washington to testify and stuff. And then the band trying to use alternative ticketing services in all these different venues, like distributing tickets through 10 Club and these kind of smaller things. And I mean, you go back and listen to, that's the era where I was running the Tape Traders thing, and you go back and there's some really amazing shows. Like they're varying up their set lists. They're still trying to put a lot of energy into the creative product, but it's really hard. And really people, they get a lot of moral support and not a lot of practical.
Yeah.
We're going to do the same thing. Or
a lot of bands said that they would, and then they didn't.
yeah, and so it ended up being a lonely fight, and they did their thing for a lot longer than I think a lot of others would. And you think about how much money they left on the table. Like those were their prime. That's kind of like Michael Jordan going off to play baseball for a couple of years in what's still part of his prime. And that's even their early prime. Like they're putting on killer shows. They're gelling as a live band. They've put out 3 albums that have been, sold a ton. There's a huge demand out there. And they're just like, no, there's this principle that we're going to fight for. And I mean, they weren't lacking for money, but that was a huge amount. You can't imagine Bruce Springsteen or someone else leaving that on the table.
And it put a divide in your casual fan. Your casual fan just said, I'm going to look elsewhere.
Oh, let me tell you, on alt.music.pearl Jam, we had people coming to complain, and there was a lot of fighting over that. Yeah.
But I think the true fans, I probably became even bigger fans.
Well, and because if you're part of the 10 Club, their fan club, they have always offered first dibs on tickets through there, and if you were committed, there was a way to do it. I went and saw them in Toronto and Augusta, Maine, and the Augusta show was really special. I don't think they've played there before or since.
Oh, wow.
And it was at a small venue. They played, I think they pulled out, Steve Van Zant's I Am a Patriot for this, maybe the second or third time they'd ever played it. I think Dennis Rodman showed up. Like it was really super cool, but we had to go out of our way to do it. And I think we got our tickets through 10 Club, and it's like, it's really special, but if I'd have wanted to see 8 shows that year, there was no way.
Sure.
Yeah.
That brings up a good point. Dennis Rodman. Yeah. Good friends with Eddie Vedder for whatever reason.
Yeah. The basketball thing and just people who do their own thing at their own expense. You talk about a guy who also probably left some money on the table in his career to be himself.
Sure.
Follow his star.
Well, he also was burning the candle at both ends. So.
Yeah. He liked to party.
After those, they won all of them Bulls trophies, I think he was pretty much toast after that.
Yeah. Well, he had a lot of titles, so he could afford to sacrifice one or two.
I recall, I heard that Phil Jackson actually really appreciated Eddie Vedder in those days because Eddie Vedder was frequently the voice of reason.
With Dennis
Rodman, yeah.
I 100% buy that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so at this point, when does Jack Irons move in?
No Code, I think, is the first album that Jack's on.
So why did they get rid of Dave?
We talk about them being good guys. That's one that still, I feel like there's probably more to the story than anybody knows, but certainly it seems that there was a perception that he was a little too rock and roll. He appears on the cover of Modern Drummer magazine and has the temerity to feel happy about it. Yeah. He buys not even a Ferrari or something like that, but he bought a luxury car and kind of showed up in it. And the contrast, right? I think so. The contrast with Eddie's beat up truck that he was still driving around and sometimes sleeping in, I think, just kind of rankled a little bit. And Dave he liked being a rock star and wanted to enjoy it. And, he's on Unplugged. He's on a lot of when they're doing press and getting famous, he's right there.
He's the face drummer of the group.
Yeah. And I think it was just kind of creative differences. And I forget who did the actual firing. I think it was Stone. It was kind of left to. And it was not Eddie, even though I think it was mostly kind of driven by him. And I mean, personally, it seems like a little unfair the way they've written him out of history when they were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was not part of it. And
complete crime.
Yeah, it's one thing to have creative differences and not want to spend your time or be around someone, but it seemed a tad churlish. I don't know.
Sure. He was the drummer for the golden years of that band.
Creatively, I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even though like he didn't record that first record, when we think of like our favorite bands, I mean, it's kind of like inducting Rush and like not inducting Neil Peart. They had another drummer. Their first album, they had a different drummer.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
I was a Canadian. I should know that, but I am not not a Rush guy.
Yeah. Most of us aren't. But But yeah, that's sort of the thing. It's like he was there. He wrote music,
and having listened to so much live music, tapes and other things in those years, like a lot of the 10 songs, it's his interpretations of them that stand out in my head.
For sure. Like the videos, he's playing on the videos.
Mm-hmm.
These are essentially the singles as far as anyone's concerned.
Yeah.
And in fact, I find them to be the superior versions to what's on the album, which it sounds like the actual album they kind of rushed through.
Which one?
10.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, I know that there was some dissatisfaction over the mixes and stuff. They were, how produced they sounded, and I think they've now gone back and had Brendan O'Brien redo them. Yeah,
Yeah. Brendan O'Brien, their longtime producer.
Yeah.
Who started in on Versus and continued still to this day.
I think they've mixed it up a little bit over the years, but as far as I know, they still work with him.
Sure. Yeah. One footnote that we kind of glossed over on Vitology. Well, actually, we're still in Vitology land. That's when they finally record Better Man.
Yeah, that's right. And one of Eddie's earliest songs, I think.
Yeah. You were saying there's a version of him doing it with, what's their old band called?
Bad Radio.
Bad Radio.
Yeah, I don't know if I know that he had the song was in his rotation already. He wrote it as a teenager, and I'm pretty sure it was part of the Bad Radio demos. There were bootleg tapes of it that circulated back then.
Basically a different song at that point.
Yeah, some of the lyrics I think were in place, but the kind of I don't think that it had hit on the sort of acoustic mix, the build in for the way that it famously gets played live. Another big sing along song at their concerts.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there was I think there was some reluctance to release it because it was so clearly radio friendly and melodic and had echoes of other kind of classic 4-chord rock or whatever the exact chord count is in it. And and you see that when they play it live, they do these extended versions where during the bridge, Ed will quote different songs. I think Save It for Later is the one that I like the best and that I think they've probably done most often. And And it's a beautiful, heart-wrenching song, again, written from or about a woman. And it's great.
Great tune.
Yeah.
I feel, to me, like kind of cements that this band is not like a one-hit wonder. Mm-hmm. Like that was on the radio. It's clearly like, all right, these guys still got it.
Yeah.
Now that they've settled into like, being themselves, because that first album, that's it. That's like a whole different process where the songs were already written and they just give it to a singer.
Yeah.
There's not too many albums out there. There's one I can think of. Faith No More Is the Real Thing. Mm-hmm. That album was written before they had any lyrics, and they had canned their singer and they brought in the singer that we all know these days, Mike Patton.
Yeah.
And so he just wrote everything just on this, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when they go to make Vitology, it's more sort of an open creative process. So you that has, like, if you think about, I'm not sure I would call it my favorite album, but it's got some of the most, I would say, dramatic and catchy songs in their canon. You get Corduroy, you have Better Man, Not For You, and then you get the, like, the experimental songs that are a bit more like, also we're going to mess around. And they were in kind of a scattered place. The Ticketmaster fight, the Fame, all of these things, Kurt Cobain's death, like they're wrestling with a lot of different things, and different people are contributing to the songwriting. Mm-hmm. So that dynamic's changing a bit. Eddie's sort of becoming, by this point, has kind of become the leader of the band, which, Stone has a great quote in 20 where he kind of says, like, it was something that he thought about, like the idea that he didn't like the songs as much or the album as much in some respect because he didn't have the same level of creative ownership over it. But when he talks about Eddie, he says like he had this artistic energy that kind of rendered the questions of who was in control of the band kind of moot because it was just clear that he was the emotional engine behind it. And you get, and just like the lyrical concerns, Corduroy, Not For You, like really clearly about struggling with dealing with fame.
Yeah.
So it's a great album and an interesting album. And for a band that famous to do that is pretty remarkable.
When I listened to it recently, I'd forgotten how rockin' it is.
Yeah.
Like the first half is just like,
yeah, absolutely.
Balls to the wall.
You got Whipping, Corduroy.
Spin the Black Circle.
Last Exit, one of their best concert openers, and just a really ripping song. So yeah, absolutely. And then you get Hey Foxy Mop Handle Mama, That's Me. You know, cap things off.
Yeah, you can't win them all, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think they've ever played that one in concert.
They must have, because one of the funny things I heard about them is that, you know, they change up their set lists every night. Mm-hmm. And I believe they've played every single album from front to back, but never with like, hey, tonight we're going to play all of 10, everybody, and they sell tickets for it. They're just kind of like, hey, what do you think if we play all of 10? Yeah,
I think there was kind of a period where they were, I don't remember if they were touring more than recording or just they decided to do it, and they went for it. And they also did a 3-run stretch in 2003 in Massachusetts where they tried to play all of the songs they had recorded to that point.
Yeah.
So the last night was, the set list must have had 50 songs on it. It was really wild.
Insane.
Yeah.
So we get rid of Dave as the drummer, and then we bring in Jack Irons. Mm-hmm. Jack Irons is, if you don't know, the drummer of Red Hot Chili Peppers, and, you know, like an important part of the history of this band, because he essentially is the man that brought Eddie Vedder to the attention of Stone and Jeff. Mm-hmm. So an important guy, and kind of feels like, you know, he should have been the drummer all along. But he kind of had his own demons that he was dealing with.
Yeah. So he was with them for I think it must have been a few years.
They did Yield. Mm-hmm. Is there one after that?
Was he on Binaural?
I think he's on Binaural.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Was Matt Cameron by then?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Why, yes. Officially, Jack Irons plays on the albums No Code and Yield, as well as Mirror Ball, which is the album that Pearl Jam backs Neil Young. And that's it. Carry on. Whatever it is, one of the albums they had made, they started a tour, and then Jack was a bit bipolar and was having like incredible anxiety attacks. Yeah. He wasn't able to sleep anymore. So he had to bow out.
Yep.
And sorry to go so, you know, quickly through Jack Irons' tenure in the band. But I mean, what else happens? I mean,
well, I mean, No Code might be my favorite Pearl Jam album. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I
also very Pearl Jammy.
Yeah.
Album.
Well, and it has the same thing. All the great markers of some really great acoustic tracks and really strong rockers, and fewer experimental tracks. Great,
more straight ahead.
Great album design. Being sent out with, it's got the Polaroids and all this cool stuff that they did along with it. Yeah.
Yeah. It seemed like for that album, they were really kind of trying for it to be a straight ahead album.
Yeah. They still hadn't gone back to making videos by then, but, it got really nice songs. Still wrestling with the fame question, like Off He Goes, but you get a more sort of an evolving perspective on it. I think the fact that they had come out of touring with Neil Young and making Mirror Ball, and you really get a sense listening to Jeff and the rest of the band talk about that period as like them realizing like we can keep up with Eddie, like we're a great band together. Like Neil Young wanted to tour with us, and like learning about how he rode a lot of ups and downs over the course of his career, both in terms of his own fame and his ability to keep making music, but also like seeing peers pass away and all the things that you might go through in the course of having by that point, a 30-year career in music.
Sure.
And and so they're through the Ticketmaster thing or getting close to just setting it behind by then. And
Sure, but the Neil Young thing makes me think of two things. With Neil Young, I know that one of the best pieces of advice that he gave the band was the confidence to not stress out if you are not at your creative peak at any given time.
Yeah.
He just kind of said, all you got to do is just keep making music.
Yeah.
Really, it's just like you're going to find your places. You're going to have your times, you're going to have your moments, you're going to have your ups and downs. But the most important thing is to just keep on along.
Yeah.
Keep on doing it. And obviously that's clearly worked for them.
Yeah.
And they've had like unexpected singles. One of the funny ones was that oldies cover song,
Last Kiss.
the huge one. And then, later on they have a really super popular song with like The Next Generation, which ends up being like the song that's on like in so many weddings.
Just Breathe. Yeah.
Just Breathe, yeah.
Well, Yellow Ledbetter is one that kind of becomes a radio hit with absolutely no effort by the band, but that's from their early years.
It is.
Becomes
that was a
popular.
B-side.
Yeah, real concert favorite, and often a set closer, sort of a riff that Mike built off of Little Wing by Jimi Hendrix, and
Yes.
Ed added another example of some of his more interesting songwriting, where he's taking more of a kind of a Dylan-esque approach to things. Where it's a story about I think a returning veteran, and the lyrics themselves are kind of obscured. He sings them a little differently, and famously, kind of Louie like. No one knows exactly what he's singing at various points in the song, but just through sheer like, hey, call in and like, will you play this? Like, it starts to get played on rock radio sometimes.
Like there's
There's the kind of boxer or the bag. Don't know whether it was the boxer or the bag, and it throws in a lot of woohoos and stuff. Yeah.
So let's go back to Jack Irons. Jack Irons gets out, and then they bring back Matt Cameron.
Yep.
From Soundgarden.
Yeah, Soundgarden had broken up by then, and they're about to go on tour, and like, hey Matt,
Yeah.
remember how you were part of our band really briefly, very early on?
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing this summer? Want to go on tour?
Yeah.
Want to learn 70 or 80 songs?
Yeah. And he's like, sure.
Yep.
Pretty big undertaking.
Yep.
And this is also the exact same time that Pearl Jam is getting fed up with people releasing bad bootlegs of their albums or of their shows. Because, one of the nice things that Pearl Jam has done is said, hey, if you want to record, feel free to record. Here's a good section. Sounds really good there. Go over there and do it. But they're getting tired of like seeing their bootlegs sell for $40, $50. And so they said, I think we can release better sound recordings of our shows, and we could probably just put it through our label.
Yep.
And their label reluctantly agrees, but they end up doing it.
Yeah.
They record every single show from that whole tour, which is fun because they just brought in a brand new drummer. So what I hear is if you actually have the time to kind of go through the entire arc of that whole tour, you can basically hear Pearl Jam becoming the tight-knit group that they are today.
Yeah.
Because they're sort of learning how to work with this amazing drummer.
Yeah.
I mean, Matt Cameron is like, he's the guy. He's so great.
Yeah, and if you've been through with Soundgarden, who he can bash, like, there's no doubt.
Totally.
Yeah, and that's pre-internet too. Like, to some degree, there was internet, but pre-streaming. So they were releasing actual physical CDs of these things, those kind of brown cardboard inserts, and
Totally.
Yeah.
And because they're on a major label, they had the distribution for it, and they broke some world record by having the most albums in like maybe the top 40. I'm not sure what it was, but they had like 10 albums that were all within like a certain thing. It's never happened before or since.
Yeah. Why not, right?
Why not?
Yep.
And like, you think about how much effort was put into it. Like when you make an actual studio album, like there's a lot that goes behind. You got to write these songs and stuff. So
Yeah.
It's like, duh. Why wouldn't that work?
Yeah. And that's, so it's a bit like Dick's Picks with the
Yeah.
Grateful Dead, but I mean, those are even more curated. Like they have an archivist. This is them going out on the road and turning these things around pretty quickly. And so it was really an original thing to do. And that's, I think, a somewhat underappreciated facet of their career is that they've done some interesting and at times counterproductive things in terms of the business of running a rock and roll band.
Sure. But it's astounding that even after all these years, they still sell out giant arenas, no?
Yeah, that's one thing that's really neat about them. And like they, you reach, maybe it's around binaural, where some fans, like Yield, I think was also a pretty solid record. It's got some really good songs on it.
Huge.
And then binaural, I think, was maybe their first one where there's a little disappointment from critics and some fans kind of start to tune out. And I would even include myself in that to a degree. Like it was sort of evidently didn't have as many strong records. And the band themselves, they were becoming adults with families and, other priorities in life. And they were like, dare I say, they were getting happy with their lives. And, that changes the dynamic of what you're doing. And
I'll never forget what Dee Snider from Twisted Sister said. They made their first record, we're not going to take it out when I rock. And then the second, like it was huge.
Yeah.
And he's like, the second record, I'm sitting in my pool trying to write some angsty rock and roll.
Yeah.
How the heck's that going to work?
Yeah. Your energy changes, right? Like to be able to incubate the kind of like fierce working through your demons, having a blast energy of an early, I mean, it's got to be so intoxicating and it's its own form of energy, but you can't sustain that through a whole career. Like even Neil Young, who can still lay down a pretty aggressive, guitar, grungy, greasy guitar track. Like he had the different stages of his career where he was writing different kinds of music and they moved into another stage of their career. And I think some of their fans, especially some of the fans who were really brought along by the big wave of their fame, kind of dropped out. And I would say like, I was probably going through a different stage in my life at that time. And you start to like, oh yeah, there's all this other cool music out there. Like we're going to check that out too. But what they did is they kind of found, they both held on to a lot of those core fans who still kept going to see them live. And there was another generation of rock fans that kind of came up, and you have this band that does these great rock and roll shows. They mix up their set lists. The shows are kind of endlessly interesting. Yeah. And, the band was also doing a lot of political stuff. They were criticizing the Iraq War in the early 2000s.
Which didn't go so well to the larger audiences.
That's right. They had a famous gig in, I want to say, Long Island, where they got booed for playing Bush Leaguer. I think it was sort of at the height of the Iraq War, pro-Bush frenzy. And
You didn't like that one? I don't understand. Maybe you like him because he's going to give you a tax cut. Maybe you like him because he's a real guy that relates to you because he's so down home. I'm with you. USA. I just think that all of us in this room should have a voice in how the USA is represented. And he didn't allow us our voice. That's all I'm saying. We love America. I'm standing up on a stage in front of a big crowd. I worked at a goddamn drugstore. I love America, right?
They stood behind it, and they get better making the perhaps less well-advised decision to back Ralph Nader and doing, but they also did like Vote for Change shows. Eddie spends a lot of time with Bruce Springsteen, and they become friends and kind of learns again a bit more about how you become a rock musician that plays to a live audience, like still really cultivates your core fans who love what you do and makes it interesting for them. And they really successfully did that. I saw them again in Toronto in around 2006. And I was just like, first I was blown away by seeing all these people who were, by this point, 10 years younger than me.
Yeah.
and also, just like being like, man, this band is still so good live. Like, even if I didn't love, I think that was the Avocado album, Tour, the self-titled album.
Okay.
And like, I wouldn't say that I was like, there's a couple of songs on that album I really like, but again, it's not like beloved of their fans,
Sure,
but just a couple more great songs to throw into their live mix. And then you have this huge catalog that becomes great traveling rock and roll show. Like you can go and follow Pearl Jam on tour the way you follow the Dead.
100%.
Yeah.
I remember that last thing that I was thinking about. One of the things about Eddie Vedder, when you think about the class, the grunge class of whatever, 1993, there, very few of them are alive today.
Yeah.
We don't have Scott Weiland. We don't have Lane Stanley. We don't have
Well, Chris Cornell.
Chris Cornell. Yes, huge.
Yeah, Kurt. No, they're
Kurt Cobain. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Lane's story is just the way he died is, if you want to scare someone off heroin, like, oof. I think he spent his last months wasting away doing heroin in his house with no one around him. Like, it was an awful story.
Jeez.
Yeah, and like these are people that Pearl Jam cared about. That's a lot of friends left by the wayside. And you see that you mentioned Just Breathe before. Part of what you see in some of these later albums is like just a coming to peace with yourself, and or Eddie doing the Into the Wild soundtrack, right? He's talked a lot about how he related to Chris McCandless, the subject of that guy who goes off into the wilds of Alaska and just like wants to get off the grid and get away from society. And just great song, Society, on that album that they start to incorporate. I mean, in some respects, they were always bringing therapy into their music. Like, you get Eddie working out his demons in his lyrics. You get Mike kind of channeling some witchy other world in some of his solos.
Yeah.
Like, he improvises really, really beautifully. And you catch little flashes of Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan that he'll throw in, like the song about Kurt, Immortality. Some of my favorite solo work of his in concert is on that song, just with the wailing Neil Young-esque, to guitar. And,
I mean, when we talk about Pearl Jam, I mean they're not a jammy band,
not necessarily, but they do have a few songs that they'll pull it out.
Sure, but one of the important weapons in the canon of that is the fact that Mike McCready is going to just solo from his heart every single time. So he's not going to mail in the same performance every time.
No, definitely not. And on that idea of that they kind of bring in this idea that you're working through things in your art. Like, so you get songs like Just Breathe and Unthought Known that are really reflective, like kind of beautiful songs that can bring a tear to your eye. And they always had the power to do that, but it became, I think, a little more something that people associated with them over the last couple of decades of their career. Yeah. Cool.
Well, how about we put a pin in this and go figure out some seafood to buy?
Yeah.
We got to make ceviche.
I'm ready.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Okay, man.
Cheers.
All right, cheers.
Awesome. So I made a pretty large helping of ceviche.
I see that.
And I had actually called you over because I didn't realize after I had started marinating the fish, for those of you who live under a rock and don't know what ceviche is, and that's fine if you don't. Ceviche is primarily a seafood-based dish that is more or less cooked inside of citrus juices. Is that too much? Is that a lot?
That's not enough, but we can have
Start
multiple
there.
bowls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this a fork food? Is it a spoon food? Is it?
I'm not sure if it's a spoon or a fork food. That's why I brought one of each.
Okay.
I feel like it's a fork food.
I think that's what my hand went for. So let's go with that.
Okay, that sounds good. But it's frequently paired with like a chip. Like if it's down from Mexico, it's paired with a tortilla chip or like some kind of corn. Originally, this dish comes from Peru, so it's Peruvian, and then they call it their national dish. So they take quite stock and pride in the fact that this is what they're all about. So, anyways, as I said, this mistake I made was that I started marinating this an hour ago. And because I used to work in a kitchen that made ceviche, and we marinated it for quite a long time. And maybe this is because the type of fish that we used was not top quality. I mean, we used a tilapia.
Oh, confessions.
I find to be quite a boring fish, frankly.
Yep.
So kind of a waste in ceviche. But I guess if you're going to really cook it to the equivalency of well done, tilapia, I guess, is as good as anything. But not this. So it has sea bass and shrimp. And I sort of started cooking those first in the juices. And I was planning on 4 hours. And then I looked online and they said, don't you dare cook ceviche for 4 hours. You basically have about an hour where it's going to be worth anything. And after an hour, at 2 hours, it's basically well done. And you're not going to get any of the elements of the actual fish. And this is why the standard practice is to use sushi grade, sashimi grade fish so that you can just kind of sear it, marinate it. So with that in mind, I also put in some scallops, which are sushi grade scallops. And at the last minute, I decided to put in the sushi grade salmon.
You had to have the salmon. Seattle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was hard for me to not.
No.
And
it was needed. It was the right touch. We had to have something salmon based.
And, you can pick around. So you don't necessarily have to have any salmon if you don't want it. But I also put in avocado. And since I made so much ceviche, I didn't put the avocado in. That's supposed to be sort of a last minute kind of deal. So I'm going to put a little bit of avocado in mine if you want to.
Well, that'll bring in the California. As we know, avocado in California.
Indeed.
Important.
Back to the recipe. So I've got these 4 different kinds of fish. The scallops and the salmon have only really been in for about 20 minutes. So they're truly cooked medium, I would say medium right now, if not medium rare. From there, I ended up putting in cucumber, which sort of hurt me, but I feel the California style, San Diego style, will have cucumber. So this has cucumber. It has red onion, which is essential. You need red onion. You also need to have a type of hot pepper. I saw a recipe that said maybe put serrano in there. I find serrano to be just a little too hot, so I ended up going with a jalapeno just to make sure that we didn't get too crazy. But maybe it could have had serrano if we wanted it. About a half a bunch of cilantro, some chopped up cherry tomatoes, about 1.5 teaspoons of salt, about 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, about 4 limes, 4 very juicy limes, and a lemon. Traditionally, ceviche was made with a sour orange. That was like the first recipe. I don't even really know exactly what a sour orange is. I feel like we see those in our
Not on purpose, often.
neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. If you get them off season, they might not be so good. And actually, I thought I have a bunch of grapefruits out there. I thought, what if I put grapefruit in? But I didn't want to revolutionize this. I hear grapefruit is very big in Palm Springs.
There's probably a lot of regional variants.
Sure.
For this, yeah.
But I wasn't getting that, so I did not go for that. No.
No can do.
I like. I feel like you. I think I counted up. There was 1 ingredient for every Pearl Jam drummer.
Certainly, at least one fish. How many Pearl Jam drummers were there?
I've lost count. I think we've got 5 or 6.
I think it's 5.
How many Matts? How many?
Yes!
Ahem. From the beginning, we had Matt Chamberlain, who played on the first demos, followed by Dave Cruson, who recorded 10 and was abducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, followed by Matt Chamberlain, who was only seen on the Alive video, which was also recorded live, followed by flavor savior Dave Abruzzi,
Sorry.
who loved guns, cars, and ladies. So then was replaced by ex-Chili Peppers drummer Jack Irons, then coming full circle yet again with Matt Chamberlain. That's 2 Matts, 2 Daves, and a Jack. 5 drummers. Case closed.
No, it's amazing. And I support the cucumber. We needed a little crunch, just a little funk in there, a little,
Right on. And we are serving this with really boring crackers. Just your run-of-the-mill water crackers. Which, whatever. It's fine. My favorite thing is plantains. Yeah. Like if you get like a crispy, like a potato chip style plantain.
Yeah.
There's a Cuban restaurant here in New York City that I've been to, and they do that, and it's quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I really wanted to make sure is that it had enough shellfish in it. I always find when I have just regular ceviche with just fish, I don't find anything exciting about it.
Mm-hmm.
But having both shrimp and scallops in here, I think really turns it into...
Yeah. And, one thing that occurs to me is about why this was, I think, an unassailable choice for Pearl Jam is like, it's tart, Like it gets to that, like, you're gonna know that we're doing something here. It's gonna get your attention, and it might piss you off a little bit once in a while.
Yeah. It sort of pissed me off a little bit using like good sushi style fish for this. Because I just feel like, if you're having really good fish, just have good fish.
Yeah.
To me, sushi is like the penultimate place for good fish to live.
Yeah.
To exist. That's like, oh, this is the freshest, this is the best, you're spending the big money on it. I mean, ceviche is a nice cousin, which, I don't know, I kind of feel like maybe that's also why it's good for Pearl Jam, because we were talking about maybe it being sushi, but I felt that was a little bit maybe a touch too highfalutin.
Yeah. Well, now, you might need to dig into this. This might be something to throw a little fact check on, but there is a Japanese influence in ceviche at some point in its Latin American history. Am I remembering this right?
I don't know.
I feel as though you're going to need to fact check this one well.
Okay. Well, ask and you shall receive. All right. I dug some stuff up. In the 19th century, Japan was not doing so well, remember? Economically and socially. And so many Japanese people at that time migrated to the Americas, including Peru, who also wasn't having a great time back then either. So, in Peru, the Japanese immigrants tried to find some comfort food, and they were restricted to the local Peruvian ingredients that were available. So a new cuisine was born called Nikkei, Niccei. This is where Japanese flavors like miso sauce, ginger, soy sauce, wasabi, and all that was merged with Peruvian potatoes, corn, and pepper paste. And one of the biggest influences was that the Japanese started using fresh fish for their ceviche, whereas traditionally the Peruvian folks would marinate their fish for like up to 14 hours, totally killing it. So, yeah, fresh fish is definitely a step up. Thanks for the tip, Jeremy. Yeah, I mean, its roots are kind of all over the place. It's like a great big, plant that, pollinates the rest of the land or the world, just because it's, it's fish. So any place where you can catch fish, and I guess it's highly popular all down the Pacific Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So like, from Seattle all the way to San Diego. And then further on down through Mexico, like, the fact that we're putting avocado and tomatoes in this, that's really a Mexican sort of addition to ceviche.
The place where the best that I've had was at a restaurant in Cartagena in Colombia, so I guess Caribbean Sea in that case, I think. And there it was sort of the thin sliced version. I think you can obviously get the sort of heartier mixed together version, which I also support as the choice for Pearl Jam. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit more homogenized this way. Yeah. But you can still pick out the things you like. Do you have a favorite fish here? Do you feel that the sea bass is overdone? Can you distinguish the sea bass between...
I almost need to go one by one. It's funny, the shrimp is actually what sort of most caught my attention.
Yeah?
What do I have here? Is that the scallop or the sea bass?
It's hard to know. I feel that the
Scallop.
sea bass is cooked a little bit more than the scallop. But I do find the salmon to be pretty delightful, actually. Wasn't anticipating that.
Man.
But it's nice. I haven't made this since I made it at that restaurant, as I said before.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I like to order at places.
kudos.
Thank you. My wife likes to order it more than I do. It's because the kind that we had made was just so bleh.
Yeah.
So I just forget how good it really can be. One thing I found interesting is that most of the ingredients in this are many of the same ingredients that are in guacamole.
Really? Well, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. You've got avocado, you got lime, salt, pepper, a little bit of onion. Shrimp. I mean, if you just take away the shrimp and you mash this up, put with more avocado, you essentially have guacamole. So it's kind of weird.
True.
But this is way fancier than guacamole.
I think so, presentation-wise and taste-wise.
Yeah. And listeners, I don't know if I shared this with y'all, but I became a sommelier a few months ago. So I'm pairing this dish today with a Sauvignon Blanc. Especially from New Zealand, you're going to get a lot of crispy notes, a lot of like citrus and minerality, and the minerality pairs up really nicely with all of this. So, anyways, both of these things are typically very summery, even though we're starting to get into autumn. But it took me a long time to get this episode out. So normally it would be warm right now, but looks like it's going to be all fall dishes here on in.
Feels. I'm happy to be brought back to the summer.
Totally. Yeah. Do you have anything exciting going on, Jeremy?
Might be having a baby in the next 2 days.
Whoa. Wow. How many is that going to be for you?
1, 2.
Two babies.
Yeah, 2. Let's cap it there. Nice. Yeah.
That's a solid lineup.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got to get some kind of instrument in their hands. I don't know what it'll be just yet, but yeah.
I feel it. Don't they frequently jump to your guitars and whatnot over your place?
When I got them out, yeah. We'll do some keys. We can start there.
There you go. Yeah, our kids share the same piano teacher.
Yes.
Lucky them. I keep waiting for them to want to show off their skills.
Nope.
Not yet.
No.
So is there any Pearl Jam facts we forgot in the meantime?
One thing that I always appreciated was how many great other songs I discovered through the band because they do so many great covers. Even like Sonic Reducer is a concert staple for a long time.
I don't need anyone, don't need no mom and dad, don't need no good advice, don't need no human rights. Sonic Reducer ain't no loser.
Even the snippets that they'll toss into Better Man or Daughter when they play that, and like Save It for Later, which basically shares the riff to Better Man at points.
Yeah.
And they Throw Your Arms Around Me was another great song that I picked up from them. So one of my favorite ones to play, which is why I started thinking of this, is I'm a Patriot, which is a Steve Van Zandt song from a long time ago that Vedder would pull out in concert.
Yeah.
I was walking with my brother, and he wondered, how I am. I said, when I believe in my soul, it's what I see with my eyes, and we can't turn our heads this time. I am a patriot.
Every so often, mostly solo, but I think definitely a couple times with the band because I saw him play it at one show with them. But it's just like they had a real ear for songs that they loved to play in concert that crowds also love to hear.
100%.
Yeah.
And also they weren't afraid to dig. I didn't know this at the time, but like reading about them, and I don't even know if you know this song, but they cover a song by the Milkshakes called Lay Down Your Arms.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Which is, I just got about 1 million facts wrong with that one sentence. Let me clarify. The song is actually called Soldier of Love, in parentheses, Lay Down Your Arms. This Pearl Jam version was the B-side to Pearl Jam's single release of Last Kiss, which sold like hotcakes. Pearl Jam gives kudos in the liner notes, actually even on the front cover, saying that they first heard the song from a band called The Headcoats.
Lay down your arms and surrender to me. Lay down your arms and love me peacefully.
Who I like very much. So much, in fact, that I know that Headcoats never actually covered this song. It was actually covered by a band called The Milkshakes, which is a band that preceded The Headcoats, both featuring the great Billy Childish. I looked it up because I was thinking, hey, he must be rich from the sale of that record. But they didn't write that song. It was originally written by Buzz Cason and Tony Moon and recorded by Arthur Alexander in 1962. When it would have been otherwise never heard again by anyone until the Beatles went and started covering the song themselves. And that gave the tune notoriety, and tons of people have recorded it since, including Marshall Crenshaw, the Kaisers' Little Steven, but it's Wild Billy Childish's band that made Pearl Jam aware of it and Carry On.
They may have done it, maybe it was one of their Christmas singles. That was another really cool thing that they used to do, was if you belonged to the 10 Club, every year you'd get like a 45 with an A side and a B side, and I can't remember exactly which ones they released at various points. I know one of them was "Let Me Sleep." It's Christmas time, an original, but I think they did covers at different points. And now
I think they covered the Sonic song "Don't Believe in Christmas."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds right.
Yeah, another Seattle band.
Yeah, and they do. Now I think it's sort of become more of a digital download type thing, but I think they still carry it on in some form or another through their fan club. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a really nice touch.
Totally. Mm-hmm. When are they coming around again? Is there been any word?
No, they did. I'm not sure. They did a tour this year that I don't even think it came through New York. And so far, the only dates I've seen have not been. They've been limited. Festival type things. I think they did a festival in Hawaii somewhat recently, or they're doing one soon. And
they're getting lazy.
Yeah, and what happened to the days of touring 200 days a year, guys? Come on.
I listened to a podcast in like 2020, and Jeff Emmett frequently said, "You know what? We've earned the ability to do whatever the heck we want to."
Well said.
He was talking mostly like creatively about like, where they're going to go musically with new albums. They're just like, we don't really have to stick to any formula. We can just do whatever we want.
Yeah, well, and it depends on the ages of your kids and stuff, like how long, how much you want to be on tour. So I sympathize, but come on, we want to see you guys. Let's go.
Right, exactly. Come back. Do 10 nights at New York.
That's a great way of doing it. Exactly.
Yeah, do like Fish does. Fish can do it.
Yeah.
For the love of God, come on.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Right on. I think that we nailed this dish. Mm-hmm. How exciting to make ceviche. How exciting to really dig into Pearl Jam. I learned so much about Pearl Jam that I didn't know before. And thanks for suggesting that we go that route.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been delicious.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. And, good luck on the new kid.
Thank you. You will probably meet the kid very soon, sir.
I'm sure that I will. And I know that I'm going to be watching the other one while you're going through this journey, which is great, too.
That was the subtext.
All right, man. Be well. All right, then, there you guys. That does it for that. Thanks, Jeremy Keane, for sharing all of your PK knowledge with all of us. It was a lot of fun. And a tasty ceviche to boot. Make yours at home with fresh fish. Sea bass if you can. Don't marinate it too long. Thanks so much to our sponsor, Izzy's Coffee. If you're in Asheville, North Carolina in the near future, stop on in to either of their locations. They always feature artwork from local artists, and they brew the best cup of coffee in town. Locally owned, the best way to spend your money. Next episode, it's been decided, we're going to be covering Toronto's very own Rush. They're a polarizing band, so we have a polarizing food coming your way as well. So until then, cook on and rock out. We'll be back soon. Thank you, listeners. I'm Nathan Palin. Ciao.